So when I was in the Air Force, I remember I showed up to base. So my job was an intelligence analyst, and I wanted my first duty station to be in the United Kingdom. I really wanted to live in Europe. So I get to this base and I'm 19. Okay. So this is just completely different for me. I'm traveling overseas for the first time. I show up to this huge military base and I walk in my dorm room where I meet my roommate. And she's got this little plaque on her bed. And the plaque said, Airman of the Quarter. And I was just like, wow, she's a woman of color like me, and it's Airman of the Quarter. And I said, wow, she must be, this is huge. I mean, there's like thousands of people. So you're number one out of thousands of people, right? And so that became my goal. I said, I want to be Airman of the Quarter. I would love to do that one day. Well, the next thing that happens is, and this is through great sponsorship and all of that. But, one of few Black women intelligence analysts on this base. And then I not only was Airman of the Quarter, I was Airman of the Quarter 4 quarters straight, and then Airman of the Year, which meant that I got to fly in an F-15 fighter jet with my base commander.
That's
and sip champagne on the tarmac afterwards, because we can't leave that part out.
This is Mind the Ceiling, a show about trailblazing women who are shattering barriers. These are the candid conversations that dig into what the journey to finding purpose and climbing to the top of industries is like. All of the victories, hurdles, bumps and bruises, and celebrations along the way, and the tools you can use to be the next ceiling breaker. I'm your host, Tamara Lane. My guest today is Tiana S. Clark, or as she calls herself, the Audacious Commander. Tiana has dipped her feet into the tech world, public school education, film, government, the Air Force, and now she is making a grand entrance into entrepreneurship. As the CEO of Driver's Seat Experience and Sochi Circle, Tiana does not take no for an answer, and not only learns how to break into an industry on the fly, but does it well. And honestly, given everything she's accomplished, I'm not even sure when she sleeps. Tiana finished her degree online while deployed, applied to Microsoft without a tech degree, and started a Hollywood award-winning web series with 0 film experience. Tiana and I talked about everything from her career start as a pilot trainer in the Air Force to how she later landed jobs over more experienced candidates. We discussed how she overcomes feelings of inferiority in these male-dominated industries and what she does to keep a high vibe mindset. And this is how she describes her journey to finding purpose.
My purpose in life is to know myself and be my authentic self in what I do, and to empower other women to also know themselves and be their authentic selves.
And how do you do that?
Yeah, well, the first step in knowing yourself is to go through a journey of self-discovery. We spend so much time doing all the things, whether it's work, running errands, homeschooling, gardening, pulling weeds, shopping. We do all these things, meetings after meetings, right? And we don't really take that time to even get to know who we are, because we don't make the time. We don't have the time. And so part of getting to know yourself is being very intentional about saying, who am I? What do I like? What do I want? What are my triggers? What gives me pleasure? These are things that we don't spend time doing. And so then we start coasting. We're just coasting through life, doing all the things. And then we end up on this path where we're unfulfilled. And so really spending that time with yourself. It sounds easy, but it's something that we don't do enough of, and get to know the answers to those questions, right? And that's the first step to finding your true purpose, because it's within, but you're not spending time looking within. You're out here.
Well, and I know, and I can't wait to dive into that journey that got you to this place, but what one word would you use to describe that journey?
Audacious.
That is amazing. Yes.
I
Yeah.
love that word, audacious. What does that mean and feel to you?
Audacious is just having the boldness to say that I will do what is best for me. And I know we're going to dive into my journey, but you'll find that at a very young age, I was like, I'm going to do what's best for me, regardless of what the traditions say, regardless of, what society says, what the path is supposed to be. I will follow my own path, or I will make my own path.
These are words to live by. Tiana's dedication to being audacious is something many women have difficulty internalizing. But being audacious means taking risks and pushing ourselves to reach our fullest potential. It's not always easy, but that's what helped Tiana achieve her goals, like being named Airman of the Year.
Oh, yeah. Well, first off, I'm a newbie here and I don't really know all the things that are going on. So it really took good sponsorship. My chief, he noticed something in me. He noticed that ambition, that tenacity, the leadership skills that I had. When I came from my training base, before I got to this base, I was the head student in charge, if you will. And so he kind of looked at my profile, and I think he knew that I had the potential to make it that far. And so I would say that was a huge piece of it. Sometimes having that mentorship and that sponsorship from someone who understands what it takes, who can give you a little bit more guidance, and then you can execute on that. And so that was a huge part of it.
Only a few minutes in, and Tiana is hitting at some of the biggest keys to success. When you have a mentor who can help support you as you continue to push through and really execute on your work, you can get anywhere. These are lessons that Tiana knows and are crucial for anyone's success, which helps lead us to what she does today and why it's so important.
Yes. So let me just say that I love Mind the Ceiling and what you're doing to show young girls that, doesn't really matter where you start, like you're going through a journey and you will find your way, you will find that purpose. And so for me, I have just a special place in my heart for young people, especially those from disadvantaged communities, because, that's my background. And so I have created and executive produced an award-winning, multi-award-winning, Hollywood award-winning tween, thank you, tween web series called Sochi Circle. And it's for tween girls, and it's really to help them become more confident, more resilient, and more inclusive.
Sochi Circle films are a mix of live action and animation illustration and feature girls going through real-life social issues.
And the reason why we did film is because we tried to find a way where we could really reach them, to meet them where they are. And they're on video all day long, right? And so that was the medium we chose. I had zero filmmaking experience whatsoever. But I knew that we had to do it in a film format. And so I just, kind of put my leadership skills to the table and hired the people who do know how to direct these other roles, and it was an amazing experience.
Sochi Circle's film crew consisted of 60% women and 44% minorities, with women in all key roles. The inspiring videos have cultivated a community of young women who empower and support one another.
And then there's the driver's seat. So driver's seat is also what I'm building to help women accelerate their audacious self-empowerment, because I think so many of us right now, we have followed the success blueprint. So we may have the job, the title, career, maybe we've have a spouse and children, maybe we've got a nice car, we're paying our bills. We've checked off all the boxes. And now we're looking around us going, is this all there is? Is this success? Is there more? Is there more fulfillment for me? But we're so distracted. The distractions are just so lovely because they keep us out of ourselves. And a lot of us are kind of waiting. We're waiting for the right person to come along, the right career to come along and save us, the right DEI program to help us, right? We don't need any of these external things. It's all within us. And so I want to help women bring out their inner wisdom and really empower themselves to do whatever they want and live those fulfilling lives.
It all really comes down to self-love, knowing your value and how precious your time really is. As a fellow entrepreneur, I can relate to that. Now more than ever, women are realizing this and reclaiming more hours in their day for the people and the things they love. If you've ever seen me on camera, you've probably seen my daughter right next to me. So this is the time. Grab these moments and don't apologize.
I want to know, because first with Soci Circle, that you said is very personal to you. And so I want to dive into, kind of the journey that brought you to this place. But I want to know first, before I do, what was your aha moment that you were like, I need to create this? And
yeah.
that's it. Oh, so what was your aha moment? Because that's incredible. And there's something magical about these aha moments.
My aha moment. So ironically, it came at a time when I was in my career and I wasn't happy. And I was asking myself, is this my true purpose? Is this what I'm put here to do? Am I just put here to go to a corporate job every day? Is there more? At that time, I also just had my third daughter.
Bless you.
Right? And I'm looking at this little face and I'm just like, man, I'm thinking about our girls and I'm thinking about society and just the exposure that they have on a level that we just didn't have when I was coming up.
Tiana wanted to create those bridges that she didn't have and co-founded the National Cares Mentoring Movement, a leading movement dedicated to connecting mentors with local mentoring organizations to help give struggling Black children and low-income families social, academic, and emotional support.
And I just thought, I thought about mentorship, but I knew. So I also, I launched a nonprofit in San Antonio at the behest of Susan L. Taylor, who's the editor emeritus of Essence Magazine. And I launched a chapter of her nonprofit in San Antonio. And the purpose of this it's called the National Cares Mentoring Movement. The purpose is to recruit mentors for organizations like Big Brothers Big Sisters, right? So what I found in that process is that Big Brothers Big Sisters and these other organizations, mentoring organizations, have long waiting lists of children who do not have mentors assigned to them because adults aren't really signing up. What we did was recruit adults to sign up, but they're a long waiting list. And so I started looking at that model and I said, wow, I love mentoring children, but the model is so one-to-one. And I'm all about scale and impact and how can we really scale mentorship? Mm-hmm. And so all those thoughts kind of formed together to say, if we did film, it's scalable. It's a way to provide mentorship in a scalable way. And so that has a lot to do with it as well.
In the founder world, there is always something to learn from one another, and her humble approach to learning has been important to her growth. Where on earth does her drive come from? Well, right here.
I would even say I discovered my true purpose then. But at that time, it was make it. Make it out of my circumstance and my situation and make my mother proud. And so I went from, sixth grade, I was average student. I was a good student, but, average. By eighth grade, I was valedictorian because I was committed. Like I something snapped, I had this uncanny resilience that was like, no one's coming to save you. No one's coming to save you. You have to save yourself. And I did, and so that has a huge impact on me and my resilience and my confidence as well, because I know I know what I've overcome. And I think that for anyone out there who struggles with confidence, sometimes, you have to look at what have you overcome in your past and use that as a confidence booster to say, if you can get through that, you can get through the next thing too.
Did you have like a close support system after this happened as you were in junior high and high school? My mother's parents, so my grandmother, my grandfather, and my mother's two sisters, my aunts, they raised me, and they are amazing, amazing people. I was surrounded by a great community of people. My school really rallied for me. My teachers, everyone rallied for me. But there was still a part inside of me that was broken. There was a part inside of me that didn't want to talk about these things. And, my family wanted me to go to therapy. And I was a very strong-willed girl. I don't know. I'm an Aries. Maybe that's. I'm going to say you're probably still strong-willed.
And, I was like, oh, I'm not doing therapy. I'm 11, right? I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. And they were like, oh, no, we'll just take her. And when she gets there, she'll, open up. I went there. I said, I don't know why we're here, because I'm not doing it. And I just refused to have those conversations, but I internalized a lot, And so part of me creating Social Circle is because we have to have these conversations. And I know what it's like to be a young girl and not want to talk about the things that are bothering you. And I also know what it's like, for adults to want to have those conversations, and it's hard to get girls to open up. And so part of the format for Social Circle is really, it's a launch pad for conversations. Each episode is just 3 minutes, and you see these girls talking about situations that they are going through. And the premise is so that girls can see that and say, I'm not the only one. There are other people going through this too, right? And then we have dialogue. So we actually did a Hollywood Film Festival, and, we screened the film, and a girl in the audience, ironically, her dad happened to be a film critic, and she's in the audience, and she whispered to him, and she's like watching the film. She's like, Dad, that's me. That's me. That's what I'm going through. And he said he cried in that moment watching it, because he couldn't believe that, that's something his little girl was going through. And so it really opens up that dialogue. I go to different schools, different middle schools, junior high, and I screen the film, and I have conversations with them. And you won't believe, I have teachers telling me that girl never speaks in class, but when she's in your Social Circle sessions, like, she can't stop talking, because they want to get it out, and they want to have the conversation. But it's just, we've got to be present, and we've got to, be willing to have that with them.
Incredible to see the work you do fulfill the purpose that you have for people you relate to and want to serve is a moment worth celebrating. That girl in the audience has now been inspired, and her whole life trajectory could change. What a powerful display of mentorship. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's fill in some of the gaps in between these moments.
So then after high school, I'm going to jump into your next step. You went into the Air Force. What was the driver behind that decision?
Oh, because go back to strong-willed Tiana. Graduate from high school. I wanted to go to Indiana University, Bloomington. That's where my mom had gone and my aunt had gone. And I was accepted to Indiana University, Bloomington. But I didn't know about how to get financial aid and funding and scholarships and all that stuff. So when I saw the tuition bill, I could not allow my grandparents to pay for me to go to school. I didn't really understand how all that stuff worked. And so I was like, all right, so we're not doing that. And they were like, you have to go to college. What do you mean? Because because my mom, she didn't graduate from there, right? So this is another ceiling that I was breaking for the family, right? So they're like, you got to go to college. So I ended up going to the local Indiana University in Gary, Indiana, which is where I'm from. So I'm still in the environment. But remember, I told you that my purpose was like, how am I going to make it? How am I going to, really kind of get out? And so after a year of that, I said, this is just not going to work. And my aunt had been in the Army, and she's retired Army. And she said, well, think about the military, but she said, go to the Air Force because they'll take better care of you. So that's how that came about. And I talked to a recruiter. I said, listen, if I have to jump out of an airplane, not going. Don't lie to me. I'm not jumping out of no planes. And he said, no, you're not going to have to do that. I said, okay, now. And then turns out you actually don't have to jump out of a plane in basic training. And so Air Force it was.
Well, and so what have you taken from that experience in the Air Force that's really helped you with the rest of your journey?
Just to understand that, man, I have so much potential, like I could really do. I went from being a 19-year-old working at Cinnabon, shout out to Cinnabon, at the mall, okay? Like overnight, I'm learning everything there is to know about enemy aircraft, surface-to-air missiles, air-to-air missiles. I'm training pilots on how to evade enemy aircraft, right? I'm mapping out their routes. I'm literally leading the war target effort for Operation Iraqi Freedom. When you start doing those things at the young age that I was doing them, at that point, you're like, I got it.
Although the Air Force holds the highest percentage of women at 21%, a huge gender gap exists in all U.S. forces. And of the amount, only 15% are Black or African American.
But here's the thing. Get to corporate America, start seeing these people that I felt like, they didn't have my background. They went to that traditional college, 4-year college. I piecemealed my college degree together, taking online classes while deployed for war, right? And it's like a quilt. I got credits here, credits there. I tested out of this, tested out of that. And I come to corporate America and these people are like, fancy degrees and 4-year this and I started feeling inferior. And it would only be reinforced when I'm in meetings. And as a Black woman, I have something to say and people act like they don't understand what I'm saying. And then the white man next to me says the same thing, but they understand what he said. And so what did I tell myself? Okay, not only am I inferior, but I need to get better at articulating myself, right? I saw it as a problem that I had. And so what the transition that happened there was I realized that if people can't hear what I'm saying because they maybe have a bias against who the information is coming from, then I will show you better than I can tell you. And so I just do what I do and outperformed everyone else. And then they start listening to me, right? But it was still a sense of inferiority. I had to tell myself, I had to say, listen, yeah, you piecemealed your degree together. Yeah, you went to the local college, but you've also flown a fighter jet and they've only done that in the video games. So why are we acting inferior? And I had to snap myself out of that.
Tiana's educational background is similar to many people around the world. Even if it's different from your own, we can all remember a time when we felt underqualified. It's hard to ask for the things that you want when you have low confidence. But early in her career, Tiana figured out how to dig deep and find it regardless of how she truly felt.
So this is, this is after military, and I went on to become a public school teacher, which was a great experience. It's a whole nother experience for us to talk about. But I realized that the bureaucracy of the public school system was just not gonna work for me. And then a friend of mine said, well, why don't you consider Valero Energy Corporation, which is where she worked. And this is the oil and gas company. And I'm like, I don't know anything about oil and gas, right? Self-rejecting. I don't know anything about oil and gas, even though I didn't know that industry per se. The role that they were hiring for was for someone who can do some training and, on a new system that I didn't know. But I said, okay, I can prepare for this. And I think I could do a good job. And so I said, why don't you put my name in the hat? And so she said, sure. So she did that. She came back and she said, oh man, I'm so sorry, T, they have already offered someone this position. And then I kind of gave her my pitch to say, listen, I really think I would be great for this. If you wouldn't mind, could you please just go back and make one more like effort to get me in? And she did. And I mean, what friend does that, right? Who does it once, let alone twice? And she's amazing. She went back the second time and they said, all right, we'll interview her. I went on the internet and learned everything I could learn. I created like folders. I really created this experience. So I would come in and do this training. You would really feel like you were in my training. And it was just so great that they rescinded the offer from the person and gave it to me. And so I'm developing business relationships and I'm really the glue between the business and IT. And so one day I am at I'm very strategic, by the way. I'm very strategic. So my VP is going to this nonprofit luncheon, like a charity luncheon, and there's an extra seat. And so I decided to take the extra seat and I sit right next to him. And he picks up my bread roll. And I was like, that's my bread roll. Mm-hmm. He said, no, it's not. It's mine. I said, no, it's not. It's mine. And he did this thing where you put your fingers like this and one is a B and one is a D. And that's how you know which one is your bread and which one is your drink. Never heard of that trick before. And I was like, oh, you're right. That's your bread roll. Okay, sorry. But it was something about, I think, because he was a new VP. He had a very authoritative leadership style. And so the morale wasn't very high at that time. And I think seeing someone that had the audacity to challenge him was, I think, very intriguing. And so afterwards he said, if you could have any role in this group, what would it be? And I said, well, here's the thing. It doesn't exist. And I think he took it offensively as to say, so, you don't want to, work in my department. It doesn't exist. And I said, yeah, it doesn't exist. And I explained to him what it needed to be. And he said, all right, why don't you go write that up? And that'll be your new job. And I said, okay. Now I had already had it written up because I was already planning to present this information anyway. But yeah, so that's how that happened.
And what I love about this, and I feel like we all could use a little bit more of, is you talked about the strategy, but also just the willingness to ask.
Yes.
And that was like multiple times in this situation was like just putting yourself out there and just being okay with whatever happens.
Absolutely.
And is that a strategy that you have? Is that something that you've kind of incorporated into your life? This like willingness just to say, okay, I'm just going to ask. Put it out there.
I would definitely say so. Yeah. Just because, well, they say closed mouths don't get fed. I mean, you have to be willing to speak up for what it is you want. And the other thing you have to understand is that sometimes there are blind spots. So as a leader, he had blind spots in the business. So it's not even as much about what I want sometimes. And because sometimes what we'll do is we'll think of it just from our perspective and we'll think about rejection. Right. And that will deter us from asking the question. Whereas I knew that there was a gap in this business that he was not seeing. And I wasn't just doing myself a service to keep my job, but I was doing the business a service as well.
Tiana's ability to speak up for herself not only helped her personally, but it gave the companies and leadership she worked for the ability to rethink their blind spots.
Well, when I was at Valero, I was actually working in the IT department. But I wasn't, I didn't have a tech degree. I'm not an engineer, so a friend of mine left to go to Microsoft. And he said, you really should come to Microsoft. And again, self-rejecting, I said, but I don't have a tech degree. What am I going to do at Microsoft? And he's like, no, listen, you understand how to talk to the business, right? You're great at building relationships. You're great at selling and just all these other things. Again, it's not necessarily the industry, it's the skill sets. And a lot of times it's your innate skills that are transferable across whatever industry you're in. I didn't really appreciate that at the time. And so I said, okay, let's do it. Right. And again, didn't know anything about the types of questions that I'd be asked in this interview. They literally asked me technical questions. And so what was I doing before that interview? I was going on that internet and finding out everything I could, because, you have to just be over prepared. So I did that. And I remember in one of the phone screens, the interviewer asked me, why should we pick you for the role? And I was very humble in my response. And he said, listen, I'm going to pass you on to the next round, but I've read your resume and you can come better than that. And when we bring you into the face-to-face interview, when we ask you that question, I want you to really go in on why you. And so I said, okay. And it was nice to kind of have that permission to be bold and not feel as though you're bragging on yourself per se, but to just really like put it out there, like, yeah, I'm the best and here's why. And so similarly, I went to that interview. I remember part of the interview process, they gave you a PowerPoint deck because they want to see how you can present, because you got to present to customers. And I showed up in the room with the interviewers and I turned my slides on. They were like, wait a minute, did you change the slides? I was like, oh yeah, those weren't working for me. I had like a whole new set presentation. And again, I think it was that boldness that made them say, oh yeah, like she's going to come in here and look at what we have currently and make it better. And in that instance, there was another gentleman who, amazing person who had very, very strong technical skills, but they gave the role to me instead.
Talk about taking chances. I have talked to so many women who admit not standing up for themselves as often as they should. In many cases, it ties back to self-worth and knowing that you are just as deserving of attention and needs as your colleagues and male counterparts.
I mean, so one of the things I love is that you're talking about self-advocacy, and we talk about that a lot on this podcast about because I think you're right. What you said before is we think we need to be humble or but it's self-advocacy doesn't mean you're not humble, right?
Right.
And how do you approach that now? Like, what is your technique to kind of blend those two, right?
Yes. That's a fantastic question because, I find that people, and this is one of the things I coach on, is I think it is to assume that people know the great work that you do, that people know these things. Look, we can't even remember what we just saw on social media 2 seconds ago. Do you think people can really keep up with all the great things that you're doing? It is your opportunity to share and to advocate for yourself, but to really just bring awareness to the great work that you do. And one of the things that I like to do in advance of meeting with people, because, they may not know my background or who I am, I've created what I term the AUDA bio, which is your audacious biography. And it's like a one slider, because people want to put a whole deck together. Listen, no one has that attention span. It's a one slider. And it speaks to like who you are, not just your career bullets, because you are more than your career, but it speaks to who you are as a person. And I use that, I remember one time I was going to be on a project with a VP at Microsoft. And I remember thinking, he doesn't know me. I don't know whether or not, people have biases, all this types of things. So I sent my auto bio ahead of that meeting. And it really gives the opportunity as well for if there is a connection, if there's some commonalities between you and that person, it gives you an opportunity to connect on a human level, before you get into this meeting. And so when we joined the call, he was just like, oh my goodness, thank you for your service. And, someone in his family served in the military, and we just were able to have a stronger rapport from the very beginning. That's my technique.
Creating genuine connections with your colleagues is so important. We can tell that it's these connections that have guided Tiana's decisions throughout her career. Great communication and self-advocacy can go a long way in helping you to further your purpose in this world. Her talent for self-advocacy fits perfectly into the world of entrepreneurship. It only seemed natural that she made the jump to this next level.
I don't look at things like as much of a challenge as maybe some people do. You know, I look at it as, where is it that we're trying to go? Where are we? What steps do we need to get there? Period, dot. And let's get those steps done. I think having my husband, who is just such a huge supporter of it, was so helpful. I mean, I was flying back and forth between Chicago and LA, you know, doing casting calls and rehearsals and all these things. And again, I had a 3-year-old and an 18-month, 3 years old and 18 months. And he held down the fort with those babies while I was gone. I remember trying to come up with a theme song. And I came up with a theme song one night in the bathtub. That's like my meditation place. And I remember the next day, I'm like, babe, I think I got a theme song. He was like, let me hear it. Like, he was like all excited. And I was embarrassed to sing it, you know, but I kind of like sang it for him. He was like, babe, that's dope, you know? So it's just like having that support system really makes you feel like you can do anything. My cousin, who's like a sister to me, she lived in LA. She's like, let's do it. I can produce it. I'm like, you should. She never produced a film either, but she's like me. We're like, let's just go. Let's do it, you know? And we did. And I think that when you are on the path, when you're on the path of your purpose, I think the universe conspires for you to win, right? Because I told that crew, I said, listen, we're going to have to film first week in December, the day I flew out, a blizzard. My flight was the last one out. Everyone else was grounded. Listen, my assistant was sending me text messages about the wildfires in California where I was going, inching closer to our film location, right? And it still worked out because I think the universe really honors us when we accept that call. You know, get on the path and let the universe work out the rest. That's a mindset.
I was just going to say mindset. How do you set the foundations for your mindset? Is there something, people have different strategies, morning routines, you know, all these different things, but what is it for you that helps you get into your mindset place?
Yeah, I would say two things. One is you have to build up proactive equity and resilience. And what that means is you have to watch what you consume on a daily basis, because you've got to have your mind, you have to protect your energy and keep your vibration high, right? So if I'm watching, this is no offense to anyone who likes trash TV. I personally don't watch trash TV. I can't watch all that rah, because it gets in you. And I just don't need the energy, right? The music I listen to, the audio books I listen to, you know, I want to keep my vibration high. The circle of people, you know, my inner circle is not filled with anyone with drama or ill will towards me or jealousy of any of that crazy stuff. It's people who love and support me, and I love and support them. And I think that really, really helps to keep your mind on the right frequency. And then the other piece I would say is, you know, I do practice things like continuing to read books like Manifest Now is one of my favorite books, you know, because it keeps you on that right frequency. I've recorded myself saying my affirmations. Like I went outside one morning, the birds are chirping, and I recorded myself saying my affirmations in my phone app, in my voice memo app, right? And so now if I'm in a car, if I'm brushing my teeth, if I'm doing whatever, I have no excuse to not just hit that play button and hear myself telling myself those affirmations that you got this, you can do this, it's gonna get hard, but it's okay. The universe wants you to win, you know, because you have to keep, you know, building up the confidence in yourself.
We agree. Affirmations are key for overall happiness and success. In her book, Manifest Now, author Ideal Ahmed shares her advice for tapping into our innate human abilities to create, discover, and imagine to become the best version of ourselves. These grounding tools are necessary, especially nowadays when we have so many distractions, such as our smartphones and social media.
I feel very lucky. I didn't grow up with social media. I can't imagine growing up with social media. And I look at my daughter and I'm terrified because I just think what we see is not the same as what life is. And so with what you're doing and creating these real conversations, I'm curious kind of what you think about that and what you also think about the dynamics of like, how are young women supposed to navigate this now? I would say that you were an influencer. How do you even navigate social, like social media and also kind of that, I would say cyberbullying? It, to me, I think about it every day and I don't have a good answer.
Yeah. So one of the episodes of Social Circle, there's a girl who wants to get a phone and she's in ballet class and all the other ballet girls are making fun of her because she's the only one who doesn't have a phone. They want to take selfies. She's got her parents' camera. They're like, pull out your phone, right? And so this is a launch pad for conversation. So yeah, we could talk about on the surface, and I do this with the girls. We talk about on the surface, like, okay, how many of you have a phone? I love to do that and see how many hands go up because I'm talking like 5th, 6th, 7th graders, right? And a lot of hands go up. And I remember one charter school that I went to, a 7th grader was telling the 5th graders, she said, listen, I know a lot of hands didn't go up for them. She's like, I know you want a phone. She's like, but let me tell you, I have an addiction and I am really trying to get over this addiction that I have with my phone. So I want you all to be careful what you ask for. This is a 7th grader talking, right?
And she's not alone. According to Pew Research, 45% of teens feel addicted to their smartphone devices, and 60% admit that smartphone addiction is a real and serious problem. I have to admit, I feel like I have this as well. Sometimes I think we just need to take a break. But let's go back to Tiana.
To be able to have that peer-to-peer influence is more than an adult could really, impact for these young girls, right? But then I like to make it fun too. And I say, all right, so what are y'all doing on these phones? Let me know, right? And they love it. They're like, oh, Miss Tiana, let me show you how we get around our parental control. See, all we do is this, and this. And I'm like, oh, really? Thanks for letting me know. But no, they tell me these things. They say, in the gaming rooms, they're being bullied. We think of things like, Instagram or YouTube. No, in the gaming chat windows, they're being bullied. And they share a lot of these things with me. I will say, though, that I think parents need to start putting our feet down. Because ultimately, your kid doesn't have exposure to things that you don't give them a device to go get exposure to. And I know that's going to be a hard pill for some people to swallow because it's the times and, but what if I want to check in with them and make sure that they're okay? All right. But there's another side to that risk as well. One of the things that we do in my household, I have 2 older girls. One's a tween and one's a teen, is it's like, okay, you're sharing the phone, and the phone doesn't leave the main floor of the house. So you're not taking this phone up to your room. So it's like trying to get if you don't want to completely shut that off, right? It's how can you build in some type of parameters around that to safeguard your children? And I know there's, a lot of these parental controls on the phones and things are not as effective as we think they are, and kids are finding ways around them. So as parents, we have to be super, super vigilant.
Okay, we just have to talk about this again. She is absolutely right. Smartphones and social media are drastically affecting young adult life. As Gen Z spends less time outdoors and faces higher rates of social anxiety and depression, if you are interested in introducing Soci Circle to a teen in your life, you can connect their elementary or middle school with this great program, and they can conduct a screening and dialogue with students.
I was going to say, because like these things that you're just talking about, I feel like I struggle with. I feel like I've been addicted to my phone. When my 3-year-old says, "Mommy, put your phone down," I'm like, one more email, like, and also
it's hard.
So tell me about your experience with this and how have you overcome it? How do you deal with it? Because you were doing so many things.
Yeah. No, it's a great question. And I too struggle with it, because my phone is like my second computer. That's part of the problem. But I will say that I will find myself sometimes, I'll wake up like, oh my gosh, you've been scrolling on social media for like 10 minutes now. We're supposed to have been doing something, right? And so one of the things that I do is I power my phone off. I power that thing off, because what it does is it triggers. Sometimes, just to be totally transparent with you, if I'm like, let's say I'm in the middle of working and I get stuck on a sentence, right? It's like this, what is the word? It's some type of weird quirk, some type of where I grab my phone. I'm stuck on something. Oh, okay, this isn't getting me unstuck. What is this doing? And it's like, it's some weird thing that I do and I go here. But so what I do is when I'm working, I power the phone off. And as soon as I make that knee-jerk reaction to grab it for these weird reasons, I grab it and I try to push it and it's black. And I'm like, oh, that's right. That's why you turned it off, because you're not supposed to be doing that. So that's one of the things that I do. But I guess another thing that I would say is just it's just some of the more basic things, like turn off the notifications, anything that can like lead to distractions. I try to keep away, but you're absolutely right. And sometimes I will find myself working on my phone and I feel like I'm not present for my children. So I think it's just a matter of, you got to have that awareness. You got to be honest with yourself, and you've got to have that awareness, and you've got to be disciplined to say, when you do pick up on it, put the thing down.
Discipline speaks for itself, but beyond that, Tiana's learned a lot of other major lessons on the way to finding her purpose, many of which our listeners have struggled with as well, like mansplaining and self-advocacy, like we spoke about earlier. Well, here are some of the tools Tiana utilizes.
But what you're talking about is something that I know a lot of women are like question all the time, and the whole mansplaining thing. And so I'm curious, besides outperforming, what other tactic do you like go into, do you utilize in order to overcome that? I need to know.
Man, there's a lot of different tactics. That AUDABIO is a tactic. Because sometimes people are going to assume that because you're a woman, they have to mansplain something to you. So I send that AUDABIO ahead of time. That's like, let me put some respect on my name before we have this conversation. And that helps to kind of ward off some of those things. Some of it is nipping things in the bud when they first happen. I remember one time I was getting mansplained to, and I kind of let it go. I was trying to give benefit of the doubt and all that and everything, right? But then the second time it happened, I had to go Jay-Z on them. I said, look, allow me to reintroduce myself. And I had to explain, like, look, I've been here for this long. I've done this and that. I don't really need you to explain this to me. And I didn't have any problems out of him from then on, right? So... Sometimes it goes back to what you said, self-advocacy.
Well, and so I just have a few more questions, but a big one that I want to know is, when we're breaking barriers and breaking glass ceilings, there are challenges that come along the way. What can you remember one of your biggest challenges and just how you just smashed through it, or the tactic that you've learned from that you employ?
I don't know.
Not
I didn't
a small question.
I didn't smash through this one right away. So, spoiler alert. But I remember when I was going for a role, I was asked to apply for this role. And it was a time in my career where, it was an opportunity to become a manager. And so it was a little while ago. And I remember over preparing for this interview. Like you've heard the stories, right? So I went in that interview and aced it. I had one interviewer tell me, this is not only the best interview that I've ever conducted, this is the best conversation I've ever had. When I finished that interview, all 5 interviewers were like, oh, yep, she's our pick. So I wait weeks and I wait weeks and I wait weeks and I hear nothing back. And I followed up. I'm like, I know I was the best person for this job. So I'm like, what's going on? And I didn't get a chance to talk to the hiring manager. I talked to someone I reported directly into him and said, oh, I'm so sorry I didn't tell you. Oh, they went with another candidate. And I was just like, I let it crush me. I let it completely take my power. I basically told, I questioned, what was it about me that wasn't good enough for this position, right? I had a miscarriage. I mean, I was like that devastated, okay? And it was just terrible. I remember having to kind of tell myself, like, you know what? It's all right. Because if they don't recognize your worth, we will go to another opportunity, where they do. Right. And so I did that. And it's like, yay me. Hey, you showed them, you went somewhere else. But did I show them? Because they took my power in that moment, or I gave it away. And so later on, I would find out person who got the position, they just had a higher level sponsor than me. It wasn't even personal. It was just politics, business, right? It wasn't even personal, but even though 5 people thought I was the best, I only cared about the one person who didn't. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so what that taught me is you're going to have enough external roadblocks out there. You're going to have barriers. Don't let your own mindset become a barrier. There is no way I should have taken a rejection for a job. Job doesn't define you, right? I took a rejection for a job as a rejection of my self-worth. And we should never be at a point where we're doing that, right? We have to validate ourselves and know our worth. And so that was a huge milestone in my career because it taught me that. And, I've just been employing that ever since.
If you could go back and tell yourself anything at 15, what would it be?
Trust yourself. Trust yourself. Because at a young age, I was strong-willed to make my own decisions and define what anyone else wanted me to do. And it turned out that I turned out all right. You know what I mean? So I would tell myself, trust yourself. Especially, if young girls listen to this podcast, it's so important because, a lot of times adults and others, we project onto our children, we project onto younger people, our shortcomings and our limitations. And it's not coming from a bad place. It's because we want more for them. But sometimes we have to let them be their own person too. And I'm proud of myself for being that person for myself.
I am so inspired after talking with Tiana. She learned her true purpose after being orphaned at a young age, and ever since has been breaking boundaries with her bold attitude. Her career, which began in the Air Force, where she practiced training teams and speaking up in male-dominated spaces, all were skills that would later give her strength when applying for jobs in oil and tech industries. She is a dynamic force that is now shaping others' lives. And that is it, the unfiltered, undeterred journey of Tiana S. Clark, the audacious commander. And now it's time for the Mind the Ceiling Mindful Minute with Anika Uden, our podcast associate producer and potentially your company's next CEO. Anika, take it away.
That was absolutely so inspiring just to listen in. I was already impressed. I didn't know I could be even more impressed. So
thank you, Anika. Thank you.
So the Mindful Minute is just short questions and short answers.
Cool.
So I'll just launch right in. First up, what book changed your life or impacted you the most?
Wow, I'd have to go with Manifest Now. It really just teaches you about the power of manifesting, and that you really have the control of your destiny.
Who is your most influential role model?
I have a few of them. My mom, my grandmother, I have so many. I birthed I birthed 2 of 4 of my children at home in the bathtub with the midwife. That came from my grandmother who birthed all 6 of hers that way. I'm just surrounded by amazing women in my family that are role models. My aunts are the most amazing, kindest people you'll ever meet. It's like I'm just surrounded by a lot of people who have so many great qualities that I can emulate and pull from each of them.
That's awesome. What do you love the most about yourself?
I would have to say my audaciousness, my boldness, to make my own way, I don't listen to what everyone else says. I'm going to do what I think is best for me and not listen to outside voices.
Yeah, that's very on brand. What do you do to relax or chill out?
I love to go to the spa and spa, bubble baths, or sitting outside on my balcony when weather permits and reading a book.
If you could have a superpower, what would it be and why?
I want that, what do they call it? Photographic memory. I want to be able to, because I feel like I've learned so much in my just schooling and education and audiobooks. And it'd be great if I could just remember every single thing that I heard or read.
I feel that. The last question I have is, what is the next ceiling you want to break?
I got to tell you, breaking the ceiling of self-empowerment is the highest ceiling that there is to break. I don't know if I have another ceiling to break, just to be honest.
And that is our show, Mind the Ceiling. And here we don't mind the ceiling because it's meant to be shattered. And we are here for you. Please subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to us and follow us on social media and share with your friends. And we'd love to hear from you. Hit us up on our LinkedIn as well as Instagram. You can ask our guests questions or celebrate your successes with us. We want to cheer you on along your journey. And with that, what makes us excited about the future?
I just feel like there's so much potential. And unfortunately, that comes from a place of me looking at where things are today and being kind of saddened by what I see and feeling like, man, there's nowhere to go but up. And so when I think about the work that I'm doing with Sochi Circle and just breaking that barrier of having those conversations with girls and changing their lives, and really, in the casting call, in the auditions, I had girls breaking down, crying, telling me that they've never seen a show that portray them in this way. They're reading the side, for the auditions, and they're saying wow, I've gone through this, and so I'm so excited about that. And then the same for women. I see so many of us who are just living unfulfilled lives, and we're just going about our day to day, and we don't realize that we can turn that around at any point. And so I'm excited to be able to help women in any way that I can accelerate their self-empowerment as well.
Special thanks to my amazing team, associate producer Anika Uden, editor Michael Coleman, writing by Brianna Puebla, and my chief of staff, Guy Gatula. Thank you so much. See you next time.